This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 386.
I do think when people first get elected to a board, there's a period of a year or so where it is possible. I want to sit back. What's the culture like? I don't feel quite confident yet. They know more than I do. Should I speak up or should I not speak up? I think you've got to try and find a little bit of courage in those early periods, or you'll miss things, and you're not putting the company first. You're putting yourself first.
G'day, this is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 386, with David Borger, Executive Director for Business Western Sydney, on building alliances with your enemies, finding your executive courage, and championing legacy projects. I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies and techniques of great CEOs and gurus, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work and life. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO, like a true chief. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. On the Inner Chief Podcast, I bring these stories to life with deep diving CEO interviews, interspersed with minisodes covering key leadership challenges, so you will find your own path to greatness as an executive. In this episode, I chat to David Borger. David is the Executive Director of Business Western Sydney, where he champions the growth, infrastructure and innovation precincts shaping one of Australia's most important regions. A former Lord Mayor of Parramatta, the youngest ever at just 30, David has also been the state member for Granville and Minister for Roads and Housing, and has spent his career bringing people together around big ideas and getting things done. He has served on a range of boards across government, business, transport, culture, including the NRMA and the Powerhouse Museum. David is still as passionate as ever about ensuring that all communities are great places to live, regardless of where they are located. In today's masterclass, David will dive into building alliances around ideas by communicating even with your enemies, finding the courage to speak up when you first get elevated to a senior position, advocating for large projects in small decision time windows, and championing Western Sydney's infrastructure, innovation precincts and legacy projects. Chiefs, without further ado, let's hear from the superb David Borger. Chiefs, welcome to the Inner Chief, and I'm delighted that we have David Borger, Executive Director for Business Western Sydney. David, thank you for coming on the Inner Chief. Mate, we have a great tradition at the Inner Chief. We love to know where our great chiefs come from. Can you tell a bit of a story that sums up your childhood and early life?
Yeah, sure. So I came to, corporate life in an unusual way. So mum and dad moved around a bit, got divorced, went to 10 schools in 2 states.
Oh, wow.
So it teaches you, I think, how to get on with people pretty quickly. Dropped out of school, worked in a spring factory in Newtown when Newtown still made springs, and then got involved in a group and we go and graffiti things around Parramatta. And then at some point in
Colour in, you mean?
Yeah, I saw the movie Dead Poets Society. Turns out my brother had gone to uni and I thought, I've got to go to uni. So I locked myself in the room for a couple of years to learn how to study, and then did an economics degree and then did some interesting things, I hope.
Wow, that is cool. From graffiti to economics. Thank God for Dead Poets Society.
That's right. It was a great book, wasn't it? Yeah.
All that about a year ago.
Yeah.
Still got it, right?
Inspirational. Yeah.
Oh, so good, so good. Okay, what was your first ever paying job?
My first paying job was as a paper boy. We lived with my grandparents actually in old public housing commission in Sefton in southwest Sydney, and up the road there was a newsagent. So I had a trolley and a whistle, and I go and sell best bets, and I think it was the Telly and the Mirror. There were different newspapers then, and and people would come out from their house and give you whatever it was, 10 cents or something, and you could buy a paddle pop at the end of it. So
fantastic. Oh, best bets. I used to love it.
That's not right.
Not around anymore.
Little tip, but that was good.
No tips, that's right. You could do something with them.
Yeah.
Okay, and important question, what was your first ever car?
My first car was a 1974 Toyota Corolla. I bought it from Auto Alley Parramatta. It was a manual. I didn't know how to drive a manual. So I bought this car and I had to drive it back to my grandparents, and I just bunny hopped the thing down Kissing Point Road, sort of jerking and bumping. Yeah, and I learned eventually how to use it.
Wow, that is great. Okay, let's get into your career a bit. You've had a really interesting career. So in 1999, you became the Lord Mayor of Parramatta. You were in for a year. Then a few years out, back in 2004, for 3 more years. So you had 2 cracks at the cherry. My question for you is this. What was different about it for you? What did you do differently between the first time and the second time?
I think 2 things. The first thing is so mayors have very little absolute power.
Yeah.
They have the power to chair a meeting, and they have the power that they can get through relationships. And so if you've got good relationships and you're building alliances and groups around ideas and issues, you can get things done. If you don't, then you're just fighting and arguing. So I think I used to, the one thing you can do though is you can bring a minute to the council, a recommendation every meeting. You say, vote for this and we're going to spend this money, we're going to make this planning decision or whatever. And I would turn up every Monday and I had crazy ideas on the weekend. I'd do these minutes and I'd send them off. And about 6 months in, finally 1 vote failed. I couldn't believe it. And I was so embarrassed that even some of my own mob side, whatever, didn't go with it. Well, I haven't told my wife. And she said, well, who did you ring before the minute went up? I said, well, I rang no one. I'm the mayor. So we got to ring people. So from that moment on, in both the first and second kind of terms, I made sure I tried to communicate, ring my enemies, my supporters, the ones in the middle. And I found that people on your own side respected you, that you're keeping them in the loop, you're taking their views. And people that didn't get on with you that well, they really respected you as well. And I found the votes went a lot easier when you were including people. And the second thing I'd say is the first time people in politics are often involved in factions and groups and whatever, and there's all sorts of things that you can and can't do. There's all sorts of rules around what you can do, what you can say, so you're not annoying someone. And the first term, I think I very much was wanting to stay within the lane. The second time around, I'd stood for the federal seat and lost by 1%. And I thought, I've only got 1 more shot in the locker. And if I'm going to do this, I have to do it my way and stand up for stuff that I think is really important and prosecute the case and have a sense of freedom about how I did that. And I think that kind of worked. I got good feedback, and that then led to being in Parliament.
Yeah, so a bit more fearless, so to speak.
Correct.
Just go for it, right? Yeah, great. Okay. So then you ended up being the state member for Granville, right? And you hold multiple portfolios, so you hold roads, housing, and look, these are different kinds of portfolios. I've got a couple of questions about this.
Yeah.
Firstly, what's it actually like being an MP? Because what do people not understand about it?
Yeah.
Like, how hard is it?
So I think that it's very different to be an MP and to be a minister. To be an MP is hard work, long hours,
Yep,
and low decision making, right? So you may know someone influential and powerful, and you can exert a bit of influence over them, but generally you don't have any great source of power. You've got a few staff, a little office, and people come in with requests for public housing that you often can't get them because there's not enough of it. So that's parish pump, and it's good. I'm an extrovert and I like people, but it's a bit going around the merry-go-round sometimes because you're not actually making decisions on big things. I think executive government, being a minister, very, very different. You have a small window of time that you can influence the world, and it's challenging because many ministers come to their portfolios without being experts in their portfolios. So they've got to work out who's who in the zoo, come up to speed on the portfolio, and then hopefully be an effective decision maker and prosecutor of cases.
Were you ever in the portfolios you held, were there any you weren't an expert in?
Yes, certainly the roads portfolio. I've got to say the thing I feel really fortunate about though in housing was I'd grown up in social housing, public housing. I had strong views about what worked and what didn't, but I'd actually worked for Dr. Andrew Schultz as the Deputy Premier when he was the housing minister. And I remember going into meetings with him, reading cabinet minutes about the problems with the system. We'd stop building, we'd prioritised, we targeted to the most in need, which was a good thing to do socially, but it actually was a terrible thing to do because we created estates full of people that weren't working, no role models for kids, and then we had these solutions to fix it. And so when I became minister, I was hit with a rainbow because I got this tough portfolio where there was no change and no money. But in the global financial crisis, we suddenly had to stimulate the economy. And so suddenly there were billions of dollars to build thousands and thousands of homes super quickly. And we beat
something you knew a lot about.
Yeah. Well, I think it was more having confidence in, we had a great team of public servants, like hardworking career people that had waited 30 years for this funding bucket to do something. And I wasn't going to stand in their way. So I said, let's go, guys, let's get this done. And we beat every other state. I was really pleased we beat every other state. at building these homes. We had brick factories in Western Sydney where the kilns had been turned off, right? So people were out of work, and it was about getting people back to work, giving the economy a stimulus, and then doing something socially good.
If you could change one thing about the political system, and only one,
Yeah.
sorry about this,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I mean, I'm going to pick something that's realistic and I think doable, and that is that I think there's not enough focus within, particularly the major political parties, on leadership. And I think people make their way, they join the factions, they learn how politics works, which is getting the support of a branch, getting the support of a young Labor, a young Liberal group, talking at an annual conference, having votes on things, doing the numbers, that sort of thing. That's all fine. You've got to do that. The one thing they don't really learn about is leadership. And I think it'd be great. And there are some groups now, Susan McKinnon's foundation is doing something in this way, trying to find the future leaders and really mentoring them. But in a couple of things. One, I think, how do you deal with the opposition? Because, the best and the most effective governments are ones that can also deal with crossbenchers, oppositions. You might have a show on in the evening saying these people are bitterly opposed, but actually behind the scenes, you might be really working on the compromise and the solution. It's an art to do that, and people need confidence to be able to do it. And I think giving young Polly that sort of mentoring about how you can be, and if you do make it to be a minister and you've got your 5 years or whatever the allocation is, how can you actually execute that well? Because there is no school for being a politician.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Now, Chief, do you want to take your game to a new level, or that of your people? Our mini MBA in leading high performance teams now has the highest NPS of any mini MBA style program in Australia at 91. Why? Because when you do the program, you get immediate and tangible performance improvement. You get dedicated time working on the business as opposed to away from it. We have a practical, real-world approach where we teach frameworks that you implement in your business as we go, and then you share and learn with your peers and with me as your coach. So the cost benefit is immediate, right? The weekly coaching sessions are live, and you get a chance to ask questions direct to me and of your peers. And the time management is completely achievable because you're only spending a couple of hours a week on this at max, and those 2 hours are actually working on the business. So if you want to add something that really changes your game, that helps you become a real master of transformation and change, and to inspire your people and love your job, check out chiefmaker.com/mini MBA. If you thought about your own skill set, I like to think of three sort of things, like a little Venn diagram, and there's this little overlapping diagram that goes, I'm good at one, I'm good at two, I'm good at three. A lot of people might have them in isolation, but the combination of all three, can you picture that in your mind, the one thing that you bring to the table about that?
I think there's probably a couple of things, but I think the one thing that I've kind of learned over the years is you do some things really well and some things you're really bad at. And generally, I would rather put more time in doing more of what I'm good at and trying to find people and constructs and supports that can help me do the things that I'm bad at. So I'm not particularly good at administration, but I think I can think strategically, and I think I can hold things together with a bit of a vision. And I like our work team. Like, I feel that our work team performs because as a leader, you've got to treat the team well, and you've got to get people on board, looking after each other and making sure if someone drops the ball, someone else catches it. So I think that coaching style of leadership, that humanistic style, that's certainly where I see myself, and I think it works.
When you were speaking before about even speaking to the opposition behind closed doors, like, there's a real art of influence here. These must be at times really tricky kind of conversations. Do you have any mindsets or a process or just the way you think about that? Because you were just saying before about, they might be putting on a bit of a show for the TV cameras for night, but then in the background, they're willing to do a deal. How do you deal with that when you're trying to have a conversation? I think a lot of people would find that hard.
Yeah, I mean, Parliament is bad theatre. Basically, it's a lot of show in parliamentary debates. The big decisions don't happen really. I mean, the legislative ones happen in the chamber, but the big ministerial executive decisions happen strategically and outside that. So, look, I think a lot of it's about relationship building and listening to people and treating. You've got to find common ground with people, both in personality terms, but in issues of substance. And I think you build that over time, and you build that with multiple people. And so when you do go to have the kind of tough conversation, at least you've got all that behind you, so that hopefully people come with an open mind or a sense of goodwill to work with you.
David, you have now been on boards for a long period of time as a director. Sydney Olympic Park Authority, Westmead Medical, Evolve Housing. I mean, that's 4 different industries right there, and you spend a lot of time in different industries. I find through my experience, a lot of the time, board members battle to add good value, right? And you can often see at a board there might be a good half that really don't add a lot of value. They're just filling a seat, so to speak, without talking out of school. But how do you continually add value as someone that may or may not even know much about medical? How do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've got to bring something to the table. You've got to bring a skill set that's slightly different to others, and you've got to be not afraid to speak up in a respectful way. And it's hard to get the balance right. I do think when people first get elected to a board, there's a period of a year or so where it is possible for people to want to sit back. What's the culture like? I don't feel quite confident yet. They know more than I do. Should I speak up or should I not speak up? I think you've got to try and find a little bit of courage in those early periods, or you'll miss things, and you're not putting the company first. You're putting yourself first, and that's a hard thing to do. And I've made mistakes there myself. I do think there's a big difference between government boards and non-government boards, particularly ones that aren't state-owned corporations, because ultimately the minister has the control and the power to make those calls. So why are you there? You're not under the Corporations Act there. It's a different framework. And really it's about your relationships within government often, that you've maybe got a better relationship than the person who's running the thing. But the reason they put you there is you can mediate between the political world and the institution, and you can also bring other things. You might need foundation money, you might need partnerships with other institutions. The project might need some public support in a critical time, and you can bring those sorts of things to the table.
Yeah. So it's like, as you say, different boards, like, are you more an advisory board kind of role, or are you actually an independent director? Understanding that role is really important.
Yeah, there's a range of different, so obviously the NRMA is a board, it's a mutual, and it's a large business. It's got lots of different businesses, but all hopefully with a sense of mutuality back to the members good. We've got a travel business, which is really successful. And I think there's a great connection between the motoring roadside, our fantastic customers have been with us for a long time as members, and the holidays business. But then, the government boards are different. Powerhouse Museum, which I'm a chair of,
Yeah, that's right. So I look at your experience now, David, I think there must have been some great mentors in your life. Can you tell a bit of a story about a mentor, someone who you looked up to, and some advice they gave you that you felt was just really important for a young or an up-and-coming David?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's weirdly, because this sounds superficial, but I remember being the mayor in the first term, and I was pretty young. I was 29 years old, and I didn't have a great fashion sense. But I remember someone sat me down one day and they said, look, if you're going to go places, you need to comb your hair in the morning. You need to make sure your shirts are on. You need to make sure your ties aren't stained. You need to just present yourself in the right way. And that kind of struck me, because I probably hadn't thought about that much in the past. And so you've got to, that was good advice. And I think the other advice that Andrew Ashorgi gave me when he was Deputy Premier, which is particularly in politics, he said in life that he's had a tendency, he's tried as much as he can not to create enemies and bring them with you. And so I think essentially he was trying to say, try and find the common ground, try and diffuse things where you can. You can't always. Sometimes you got to have the blue, the Barney, to fight for a great cause, but don't do that unless you absolutely have to.
Let's talk a bit about business in New South Wales and particularly Western Sydney. I mean, right now in your role, it's championing all the growth here, and we're doing this from Western Sydney to back you guys on what you're doing. What's big now, like for Western Sydney? What are you championing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Western Sydney, Parramatta has been an overnight success. It's taken 30 years. It's the best example of government office decentralisation in Australia. I think there are a number of things, frankly, under the Bear government that made sense. So we've got a big city, and we were going to be a polycentric city, so lots of different centres. And the problem with that is really large global cities, they don't have like 28 CBDs. They have 1, 2, 3 or 4 really big ones. And I think when they made the decision to put a lot of eggs in one basket, Parramatta Light Rail, Powerhouse Museum, government office relocation, new stadium, upgrades to Westmead, Metro on the way, that sent a signal to the market, and the market has responded incredibly well with 20,000 jobs that Parramatta Square we're sitting in now. So that's gone really well. I think the next big issues are Metro West. We've got a $25 billion plus, the most expensive infrastructure project, I think, in our nation's history, which is 5 to 6 years away. And that's going to generate these really significant station box developments. So governments had to buy a lot of compulsory acquisition, entire city blocks. The one here is meant to generate 200,000 square metres of gross floor area, which is enormous. And they're probably going to the market at a time when commercial is challenged, residential is challenged. And so finding a way in all of that to say, how do we get a great place outcome? Because this is going to be there for hundreds of years. Let's in a tough time, let's not make the wrong call. And then I think increasingly we're looking at, I think the innovation precincts around Westmead and Liverpool, we can do a lot more to boost them. We've got 1,000 scientists in Westmead. It's got the second highest number of PhDs of anywhere in New South Wales. But we've got to find a way to commercialise that research, to attract investment, to really pick up on that innovation precinct concept. And then finally, I think further west, there's a whole lot of southwest Sydney, which is a sub-region in its own right, that is really missed out. There's one big council area that's exploding. It's got one high school. The one the council area next door has got one train station. The inner west has something like 40 light rail, heavy rail, metro and ferry stops. So you've got this kind of chalk and cheese exploding population. So advocating for that next wave of infrastructure is a good thing, but it's a delicate dance because we know government doesn't have a lot of headroom. They probably did a little too much and that was inflationary. But how we can gently get some focus on that sort of outer area, I think is a key priority.
Just thinking back to your own career, this is just so cool to hear all the moves you're making. And it just must come with the wisdom and the experience you've got about how to navigate the incredible size of this infrastructure. Are there any setbacks or things that happened that have shaped the way you go about this sort of work now? What's really shaped you?
So my sense is that you've got to advocate for something that's possible, not impossible. But advocacy has a certain time slot. The bus is only turning up so often, Greg. And when the bus turns up, you have to get on the bus. And that's the problem with a lot of cities and a lot of mayors and leaders. The bus finally turns up and they get scared and they choke and they don't drive it fast enough and it doesn't get them where they need. And so I found with the Powerhouse Museum, it's a challenging project. There was a fair bit of controversy around it, but it needed champions. And without the champions, we wouldn't be getting a $1 billion tier one institution on the banks of the Parramatta River. That bus would have left town and it would have come back for 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, you think about even things like I just saw it in the paper again, I think it was yesterday, saying the high-speed rail network on the East Coast has now got yet another design between Sydney and Newcastle. And how many years has that been going on for? I mean, it just can't seem to get that off the ground, but it would be great if they did.
Well, maybe, the presumption is that Albo should have a bit of confidence now. He did quite well last time. He might get another time. So he might get a long run. Sometimes you need a long run to do big, long things.
Yeah, excellent. David, what else is a passion in your life? You got this amazing work you do with building all this infrastructure and championing all this work. What's another passion you've got?
Look, I think I am interested in sort of the way cities are built, urban design, what makes a great place, what makes a great street network, footfall traffic, retail choice. How do you actually lay out towns to be places for people? And I think unfortunately it's almost like we've forgotten how to create the main street.
Yeah.
You go to outer suburban areas and people are happy. They don't need to be saved.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't have to drive to everything. We've got to go back to the future a bit and learn. So I'm really passionate about that because I think that's something I think it's important and we've missed it. Bring back a high street. And I think I'm also I do love live music. I love jazz. So I went to New Orleans a few years ago and we saw a great series called Treme. I was raised by my grandparents, so they always had swing and jazz on the record player. And I wish we had more venues, live music venues locally.
Well, that's bringing the village to life, isn't it?
100%, yeah.
What city or place or village or town have you been to that you go, I love the way this is set up?
Yeah, wow. Lots of them, and unfortunately, they're almost always old places. The old places are almost always, they have the highest amenity, the finest grain. I think one of the best things you can do when you go to a city is, of course, we've got to plan our day and our travel and so on out in our routes, but sometimes it's great just to rock up, plant yourself in the middle of a sort of 500-year-old city and say, go and discover it. Go and use your eyes and your ears and look around. But look, I do think the old grids are great. New Orleans is unusual and amazing. It's the most musical city in the world. You can go to 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 small music venues there and get an intimate experience. The busking is just as good. I know it's got its problems. It's got a lot of challenges. but it's a great town.
I've never been to New Orleans, but it's very high on my list. Right, Chiefs, more from David in a minute. Now, recently we had Jamie Christo, CEO of Cotswold Outdoor Group. We spoke about optimising the retail value chain, adapting your pace of leadership, and championing AI innovation. Here's what Jamie had to say about displaying self-awareness as a leader.
You have to completely slow down, and then you don't want to slow down too much that you're not moving forward. But the reality is not everyone's going to see it how I see it, and not everyone's got the same background. And also, I'm not always right. So I might move quickly and assume things, but then if I haven't asked the right questions or I haven't got this consensus of the team, I could be completely missing everything.
You can listen to that wonderful conversation with Jamie Christo by going to chiefmaker.com/384. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the podcast and check out all the other great interviews with our chiefs and gurus, as well as all the minisodes by going to chiefmaker.com/listen now. Righto, Chiefs, let's get back to our magnificent chat with David Borger, Executive Director for Business Western Sydney. Okay, David, we're getting towards the end. Just to shift gears a bit about what the future might hold for us as leaders and executives. We talk about the augmented executive, like being backed up by AI. How are you adapting your own style now, and what are you using to make your life a little bit easier on the AI front or any front?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we're using AI more and more. We've got Copilot, which is the easy one. That's good. But the more enhanced versions, I think, can be used. I think that when the answer's cheap, the important thing is the question. So I think I was at Microsoft recently, and they said their executives, senior executives, they have to spend 3 hours a week using a whole lot of new apps because the company's just so concerned that there's these productivity improvements, that transformational things that may already be on the market, on the shelf, but no one's tried it yet, and they're moving quickly. So I think we should do more of that. I really do.
Yeah, the rate of product development is just so incredibly rapid.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, we have some final rapid fire questions that all our chiefs answer. Okay. We would say at Chiefmaker that the great chiefs have done the hard internal work. Is what we call the inner chief. When one is connected and aware and grown their greatest self, the best of them comes to work and life. Can you share one thing you've learned about yourself that really changed the way you operate in the world?
Yeah, look, I think when people have to manage others, they often don't get any training. There's no rule book, and they have a lot of assumptions about how that should work. And I think trying to bring your authentic self to the table, being human, not being afraid to be silly sometimes in front of the crew. We've got a bit of a work family here, and I think it's the strongest part of our team. It's the reason that we do well, we perform well, we celebrate successes. So I think that requires a lot of curation. And no, I didn't know how to do that when I started. I remember being the Lord Mayor, and I was a young bloke, and I was almost reticent to ask the small team around me to do the job. I felt guilty to throw my work onto someone else. Over time, you realise that delegating is actually giving people opportunities, particularly when it's done in the right spirit.
Has anyone ever given you courageous feedback from the heart?
Yeah, look, I think we've all got, when you look at the human synergistics wheel of the world and behaviour, I think we've all got areas that could do better. And I had some good areas, which is great. But I think having the tough conversations and not shirking those really difficult conversations with the team or with external stakeholders when you've got to have them, you got to sometimes put on the serious, honest face and walk into a room and just get to the bottom of things. And people often avoid that. And I think when you avoid it, it just gets worse. You've got to deal with it. Yeah. But it's hard. And so people have advised me over the years, you've got to do that.
Yeah. I remember a client of mine once was telling me that the chairman of the company he worked for was almost like a British aristocrat, old school. And he would come out here a couple of times a year. And he'd had a senior member of staff, CFO or something, that was causing trouble, and he just let it go on and on and on and on. And I think the third time the board chair came out and said, "Will you stop dancing around the issue?" To this bloke, what are you dancing around it for? And it says, "Oh yeah, okay, maybe I am." For 12 months. Yeah. Okay. If you could lead the ultimate executive team, right? Any well-known leader from any time in history, who would your first three picks be?
I mean, look, I think Steve Jobs is someone he didn't just transform a company, he transformed entire industry, transformed music, he transformed computing. He was a champion for creating a technical culture within the business. He was brilliant at marketing things. I think he changed the world. He was great. He'd probably make a good CEO. And I think for a chief operating officer, there's a guy called Bill Knudsen. So Bill ran, I think, General Motors, Ford. He was the president of Chevrolet. He was actually an immigrant from Denmark that turned up in America a long time ago. He's passed away now. And then the Second World War came. Now, in the First World War, they let the army procure the munitions, what they needed to fight the war. And the army was slow and difficult and bureaucratic and, frankly, hopeless and took too long and had poor outcomes of whatever. They didn't have that time. They were scaling up for the war. The American public didn't want a war. The president wanted one but couldn't say. And they knew they had to move quick. And so they got this guy, Bill Knudsen, and he was able to marshal the car manufacturing industry to pivot and turn and retool and to basically win the war through planes and munitions and all the things they needed, and to scale up so quickly and so massively. And he did that because of the strength of the guy, the relationships that he had. He'd come from the private sector. The public sector couldn't do it. The public sector needed the private sector to do that. And I think it was his use of the form of contracting. He did use a cost-plus method because it was the only thing that could have worked in that time. But there was a lot of trust in the industry back then as well. So I think there's a great book called Freedom's Forge.
I was about to ask, is there a book about this? I've never heard of him.
I know, Freedom's Forge, and I encourage everyone to read it. It's a fantastic read, and I guess Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett. Yeah, I just think he's obviously in capital allocation, the clarity of the information through the shareholder letters, this sort of the prudency that he's operated that company. I mean, even though he was a CEO, I think he'd be great CFO. I think he'd be an inspirational, visionary CFO.
I read an interesting article, I think it was in the Fin Review this week, and it was an ode to the end of the Berkshire Hathaway and shareholders.
Right.
And those that have followed that for 51 years or something, he's written that letter.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your number one interview question when hiring people for your teams? And that might be on a board if you're trying to get a CEO, or it could be anything.
Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure about the interview question, but the one thing I think culture is really important. You build culture over time. There's lots of ingredients in the culture, and if it's a good, positive culture, it's productive, it's achieving results, and you got to protect that culture. So I think making sure someone's a good cultural fit or the right cultural fit for a group is the thing that if you get it wrong, I think can be catastrophic. Like I think you can measure someone's technical competence. You can look at their experience, their ability to innovate, their adaptability, their strengths and their weaknesses. But the cultural fit's got to be something that is a non-negotiable thing. Unless they're the right person for the cultural fit, then I think you're risking a lot.
So that's what you're hunting, the cultural fit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. What is the number one book you recommend?
Number one book. So this is not necessarily a self-help book, but there's a couple of books I've read that have really changed my view of the world. One is a book called The New Geography of Jobs by Ritty, who was an economist at Berkeley. And basically, when I started this job 13 years ago, it's like, well, we have a region of a couple of million people. How do we change the region's economy? And so he's written his book about regional economics. Essentially, it was around innovation and the fact that the world's changing, that innovation precincts are hard for governments to create. I mean, they can support them when they're on their way, but creating one out of nothing is virtually impossible. And when they exist, they have really strong economic multipliers. So they create lots of jobs through a software engineer and a patent attorney playing golf on the weekend. You get these spillovers of value. And then there are places like the way Detroit was, where an old industry, it's failed, the town's failing. And so his view was you need to support those innovation precincts, but try and find a way for people to, if they can, to move to those innovation precincts. And the second thing I think is really important is just with the housing crisis. There's a bunch of great books out there at the moment around this abundance theory. We've put a brake on housing for 50 years. Increasingly, we've stopped. We've zoned areas to prevent people from coming in, and that really harms our productivity. So,
yep. Can you nominate another chief you hold with great respect you think should be on the podcast?
I mean, I think it would be interesting to interview someone like Simon Draper, who's the head of Premier and Cabinet. So he's not from the private sector, but he's basically in charge of the entire public sector. So the Premier's office and the whole thing.
I mean, a huge number of our listeners are from public sector. So
smart guy, economist, used to run airports and all sorts of things. But it'd be really interesting to hear from Simon, I think, about what drives him and what drives him to drive the public service to do things.
If we can lure him on
Yeah.
the show, I'd love that discussion. If you could lead any organisation in the world, right, you get the keys to the CEO or chair, right? I don't care which one you take. What would it be?
So, and I'm sorry, because you asked one, right? And
That's all right. Yeah.
So I think two things. I think Blue Note is the traditional jazz label. Blue Note also run Blue Note theatres in Hawaii and New York and Tokyo and so on. But it is the preeminent kind of jazz brand in the world. And I just think it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. I guess the second thing that I think would be interesting would be a sort of major development company. Like I think I'm not a developer. My dad was, my daughter is, but I've been in and around that issue of city building for such a long time. You would hope there'd be some value that you can actually add in creating better cities and better towns and better neighbourhoods.
Okay. Last question, David. What is a final message of wisdom and hope?
I think you've got to be true to yourself. You've got to be yourself. And I think find out what you're really good at and double down on that. Make that the crown and glory of the show, and just find ways to get help with the things that you're probably never going to smash it out. Rather than, I think you can spend a lot of your life trying to fix those things that might be personality based or intelligence based or whatever, and you'll be far happier and more productive if you can rev up the things you're great at and just find ways to fix that.
Love your work. David, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Righto, Chiefs, that sums it up for this week and the remarkable David Borger. You know, this was a real delight. I didn't know what to expect when I met David, but he just had this energy, this passion, almost a force of nature about him. He's a really awesome guy trying so hard there for Parramatta and Western Sydney. So I highly recommend you go and check out more about him. Go to chiefmaker.com/386. And if you would like to stay in touch and hear all about some of the best resources that you can find anywhere in the world to improve your performance at work, go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chiefs, as always, remember to stay epic.